citizen. Same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices.
Welcome to our People-Powered Planet podcast. I'm Arthur Kanegis, the host of the show with co-host Melanie, Bennett, and I'm also the director of the film The World Is My Country, and a recent version we put out called We Are One. I've been involved in the nuclear and peace issue from way back. I was working with the Center for Defense Information in Washington, D.C., a group of retired military people speaking out for peace, when I made the film War Without Winners, and was part of doing the nuclear war research for the ABC TV special The Day After, that riveting look at nuclear war and what it would that helped bring nuclear war, make nuclear war a reality, not just for the 100 million people who watched it and the 100 million in the US and 200 million in the Soviet Union, but also for Ronald Reagan, who says in his memoirs that it was that movie, The Day After, that convinced him that his generals were lying to him when they were saying he could fight and win a nuclear war, and they were egging him on. And he realized when he saw that nuclear war is a war with no winners. It's a war without winners. And so today in our show, we're going to talk about how we can actually move from the threat of getting into a war without winners to being winners without war. And our special guest today is Richard Denton. Now, Richard Denton is an outstanding Rotarian, world citizen. He's the associate professor at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, and he's the president of the Canadian Physicians for the Environment, the Canadian Association of all the physicians working on the environment. He's also part of Physicians for Global Survival, and he's the North American co-chair of the International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War, who were part of the film I made in 1983 with Paul Newman called War Without Winners. You go to warwithoutwinners.com, you will see that movie free. So with that, let me introduce our guest and bring you on. Are you there?
Yes,
Richard.
I am. Thank you very much, Arthur.
Well, Richard, what else did I miss in your bio that we should say a little more about you, or should I launch right into questions?
Yeah, I was a past president of CAPE, and Physicians for Global Survival is now International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, Canada.
Ah, good. Wonderful. All right. Well, now, here's my key question for you. As a medical doctor, you go to extraordinary means to save one person's life. I mean, you will knock yourself out and do great things, and the family will be so grateful. Now, why does a person who works on saving lives like that, why do you get into this whole nuclear thing?
Well, I think medicine itself has changed a lot. I started out as a general practitioner, and as you say, I looked after you, the patient in front of me. Then, just as I was finishing my training, it started into family medicine, because what we find is that if you are sick and you're the breadwinner, then that affects the whole family. And so we really need to look at the whole family. Then in terms of medicine, it's not only to treat the disease that you have, the illness that you have, but it's much better to prevent it from happening. And so therefore we have to look upstream to the causes of diseases. So is it pollution? Is it various infections that we can prevent with vaccination, such as the pandemics now that we're looking at? And then it enlarges into community medicine. And I was the mayor of our community, a little town up in Northern Ontario called Kirkland Lake. And we looked at preventing our water being contaminated by Toronto's garbage. So again, as a doctor, I was looking after the health now of my community. And I think now we are faced with existential threats of climate change, pandemics, the COVID that we're now just having, and the worst is nuclear weapons. We have looked at weapons of mass destruction, and again, whether it's landmines, biological, chemical, cluster bombs, but the worst by far is nuclear weapons. And so that is why I'm now working to prevent that as a continuation of helping people's individual health. So you start with local and then you go to global.
It must be frustrating to be, I mean, here you are working so hard to save lives and to see that there's whole industries devoted to destroying lives and possibly destroying life on Earth. Does that strike you as ironic?
It is. And I think that's what people don't realize is that if you had a nuclear bomb, which will be aimed at a city, which will be killing innocent civilian lives, not military, that also will be killing all the doctors, all the hospitals, all the people that could possibly look after them. So there'll be no rescue. And so therefore there is no treatment for a nuclear bomb. The only thing that we can do is to prevent it. And our motto with Rotarians for Nuclear Men is no nuclear war, no nuclear weapons. Ban nuclear war, ban nuclear weapons.
Wow. Well, now, is it really possible to get the nations to outlaw nuclear weapons? Is that just pie in the sky, or is that really something that's viable?
It is very much viable. I think it is pie in the sky and that you're a dreamer if you think that a nuclear weapon is not going to be used in the future. I think we've had 75 years now of being extremely lucky of not having a nuclear weapon disaster. There's been numerous accidents, numerous nuclear bombs have been dropped, have gone missing, are laying on the ocean floor. And luckily, none of them exploded. And so it's a dreamer that thinks that an accident or a miscalculation or a terrorist will not happen. You know, I think in our own lifetime, Arthur, we have seen the fall of the Berlin Wall. Prior to that, who would have thought it? That was impossible. So a lot of impossibilities have become reality. And I think that our hope is definitely to have the reality of eliminating nuclear weapons.
Well, let me just add to what you've just said that there's an extraordinary film called The Man Who Saved the World. And it's a movie about the real life case of a Soviet military officer, a colonel, whose orders were all the Soviet radar and all of the Soviet computer systems showed that there was a massive US incoming nuclear strike. And his orders were that he was supposed to retaliate. But he asked pilots for visuals. And the pilots said, well, we can't get visuals because there's too big a cloud cover. But we know it's real because all the different computers have verified it. And he refused to follow his orders. And it later turned out that it was one computer fooling the other computer and they were all making a mistake. And he was actually punished for failing to follow his orders. It's an extraordinary story to watch that. But he was a man who literally saved the world. And as I mentioned, the movie The Day After convinced Ronald Reagan that he had to start the strategic arms limitation talks. And there are currently government leaders who don't understand. They think it's actually possible to fight and win a limited nuclear war. And yet, overall, there's so many people who realize that's not possible. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's happening with this treaty I understand there's a United Nations treaty in the works that would actually ban nuclear weapons. Can you tell us about that?
Okay, I'll just back up just a minute because I was in Moscow at our IPPNW Congress in 1987. We had just won the Nobel Peace Prize in 85. And I'd happened to have blood on my knee and ended up in hospital. as a patient. And as a patient, one night we watched the day after your movie. We watched it in Russia with dubbed into Russian, and all my fellow patients sat around and watched it. So just wanted to let you know.
Wow, that's very interesting. So what was their reaction? What happened?
Again, I mean, I don't speak Russian, but they were certainly very mindful of the movie. They were intent on watching it, and I think it certainly opened their minds as well.
The fact that 200 million Soviets saw that, I think that was part of what contributed to Glasnost. I think it was part of their realization that nuclear war, was not winnable. And certainly in the U.S., I meet so many people who were touched by that film during their lives. Now, I wasn't the producer or the director. I was the one doing the nuclear war research, and I would fax it out, to the people building the sets, because they had to know how much destruction there would be this close to the epicenter and different distances away. So they were getting that info. But for me, it was like a devastating experience. As I was researching that, I would wake up with nuclear war nightmares. And, normally I wake up from a nightmare and I say, well, there aren't really monsters under the bed. That was just a nightmare. But I would wake up and say, oh my God, it's real. It could be 20 minutes away. And, it was a much deeper fear than fear for my own life. I mean, I could see I get killed, my family gets killed, even my neighborhood gets destroyed. But the entire history, all music, all art, all the incredible scientific advances, all the things we've done, all for nothing because some crazy nuclear war, because we couldn't work things out. And that really set me on a path to doing the work I'm doing, to devote my life to preventing nuclear war. I remember I went down in the basement during the Cuban Missile Crisis when it looked like we really were very close to a nuclear war. And I was just a high school student. And, in DC, people were mobilizing and the teachers were telling us we were supposed to hide under our desk. And I refused. I said, my God, this is Washington, DC. We're going to be a prime target. Hiding under our desk is ridiculous. We've got to prevent a nuclear war. And I got punished for that. I got sent to the principal's office because I wouldn't get under my desk. And I instead thought we had to go out and stop it. And I think we did. I mean, people helped bring about the Test Ban Treaty. They worked with Kennedy, and he attributes it to Women's Strike for Peace, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. The groups that were mobilizing to help prevent it made a difference. And that's where we want to touch our audience here, because we want to let them know how they can make a difference. So let's talk specifically about the treaty that's in the work. What is the treaty? How many nations have signed it? And what are its prospects?
I'd just like to tell you a little bit about that experience. I went to the United Nations and was at the United Nations when the treaty was actually being constructed. And
wow.
The treaty was put together by the countries of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and that works on sort of a 2/3 majority. But what happened in the room was that a representative of a state would get up and to speak, and first he would thank the previous speaker. Then he or she would say, Madam Chair, who is Elaine White from Costa Rica. He would then say how he wanted the article changed. And then he would finish by saying, Madam Chair, if you would like to change the wording, if you would like to put it somewhere else in the treaty, please feel free to do so. It was the most congenial organization. On Wednesday, the group went into in camera, which means that all other people should be excluded. And they said that we NGOs, non-government organizations, could still stay in the room. Again, something that was unheard of. And as a result, 122 countries passed in favor of the treaty when it was finally done after the end of 2 weeks. One country abstained, Singapore, and one country, the Netherlands, voted against it. So to me, that was true consensus.
Wow. Well, now, how many nations are there in the UN? Isn't it about, is it 186? How many are there?
I think it's just over 190 now.
Over 190 now, right?
Yeah, about 190.
So that was the vast bulk, more than 2/3, right, of the nations voted for it.
Correct.
So now, how does it officially get considered international law?
Okay, there's sort of two steps for that. It was now introduced into the General Assembly for signing and ratification. So right now, 82 countries have signed it, saying that they support it. And 44 countries have now ratified it. And we just need 6 more countries to get to 50 before it becomes international law for the countries that have signed it.
All right. So at 50, then it becomes officially international law. Okay, so I have a couple of questions about it. Okay, the objection that some people raise, and by the way, that 6 sounds like quite a doable number if people get behind it, but the people who object to it say it's the mutual assured destruction, the fact that nuclear war would destroy the world. That's exactly what has kept us from getting the US and Soviets, for example, into a war, why the Cold War never erupted into a hot war. What do you say to the claims that nuclear weapons actually help reduce the possibility of a major world war?
I think that we have been extremely lucky over the last 75 years. This is the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's the 75th anniversary of the formation of the United Nations. It's the 50th anniversary of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And I think that we have been extremely lucky not to have had a nuclear war. I think there are so many accidents that have happened and miscalculations that have just luckily not have happened. I think though what you're talking about is deterrence, and the whole idea of deterrence is, just as you've said, that it would be a mutually assured destruction, MAD, and so therefore nobody wants to use them. But if you're not going to use them, then why have them in the first place? Why waste all that money? And it is trillions of dollars that are being wasted on nuclear weapons.
Well, and doesn't mutual assured destruction assume that all the other players are rational? But haven't we seen in the world that there are a lot of irrational leaders or even independent groups, terrorist groups and so on, who are increasingly possibility of getting these things, who would not be deterred by reason? I mean, we see suicide bombers. They're not worried about themselves getting killed. They're out for maximum destruction. So aren't we? Well, what does the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist nuclear clock say now? Now that's that doomsday clock that was started in 1947. At that time, 7 minutes to a proverbial midnight of unbelievable catastrophe, the end of civilization as we know it. What's happened to the clock today?
It has now moved up to the closest it's ever been to midnight, 100 seconds to midnight, a minute and a half to midnight. And that's the closest it's ever been. So even during the Cold War, even during the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was not this close. And I think at that time, you had the two actors, the Soviet Union and the USA, as being the key players. But now we have possible trouble spots with North Korea. We have trouble spots with India and Pakistan. We have trouble spots in the Middle East. We have trouble spots with the Ukraine and Crimea. So the world has certainly become a lot more complex. When you actually go back to looking at deterrence, and you go back to 1952, I think it was, when North Korea attacked South Korea. North Korea knew that South Korea was backed by the United States. The United States had just bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it was very fresh in everybody's mind. And yet North Korea went on and attacked South Korea. More recently, we saw Argentina, a non-nuclear country, attack Great Britain, a nuclear country, over the Falklands. So again, deterrence did not work in these situations, and there's certainly been many other situations all the time. India is being attacked by Pakistan, and vice versa. China has just recently attacked India. Both are nuclear power countries. China is always having border skirmishes with Vietnam, a non-nuclear country. But again, Vietnam retaliates back and chases the Chinese back to China over islands that have been captured. So
it's pretty clear you're right that that we've. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's excellent examples. But it does seem to me that then what's happened, as you said, is we've been extremely lucky. So now I think we do need to move more, and I want to hear more about this, your actual experience with this law, this international law. Tell us more about that treaty and what we can do to get those 6 more people, and then what will that mean? So let's move back to that with your personal experience in that.
Well, I think, again, I love your introduction here today with your People Power podcast. I love alliteration. And I think that, again, it is we, the people, that are going to change. And unfortunately, our governments it's not the military-industrial complex, it's the military-industrial political complex. All of them are tied in together. And then there's tentacles that go into Hollywood, into making all the war films and glorifying war. So it is extremely extensive, but I think that the pandemic has shown that you and I mean, what are we worried about? I'm not worried about Russia attacking Canada or even the United States. What I'm worried about is a heart attack, dying of diabetes, having a pandemic, having not enough health care. These are the things that we really need to worry about. Climate change, that the military has no answer for. So these are global problems that the military cannot deal with. And we therefore need to completely change our way of thinking to addressing these issues. Now, in the United States, in Canada, our governments are giving a lot of money to fighting COVID, but where is that money going to come from? And I think that, we talk about defund the police. I think we need to be defunding the military. And your recent senator suggested defunding it by 10%. And I think certainly that is a start. But I think that we as people, the people power, need to be doing it in our own communities.
Well, isn't the U.S. moving in exactly the opposite direction? Aren't we funding a vast array of new and improved nuclear weapons? Tell me a little more about that.
Certainly. Obama, in his year, led the United States into contributing $1 trillion over the next 30 years. That's now moved up to $1.7 trillion to modernize.
To modernize nuclear weapons.
Modernize nuclear weapons. And out of that modernization, has come the low yield bunker busting bomb, tactical weapon that is much more likely to be used. And once you use a small nuclear weapon, then that's certainly going to escalate into larger and a full-scale nuclear war and the destruction of humanity as we know it. So the world is becoming much less stable. And that is why, again, coming back to the doomsday clock, it's at 100 seconds to midnight because the world has become much more destabilized than it was back in the Cold War. And you also were talking about being a dreamer. Back during the Cold War, we had 70,000 nuclear weapons. We're now currently down to about 13,400, 500, under 14,000. And so we were able to decrease it to that number. And now, of course, what we need to do is to get rid of them entirely, get to zero.
Yeah, because 13,000, I understand, we're going to have a guest next week. I think Ira's going to talk about the report they were part of, that even if tell us about what percent of even these existing weapons would still destroy life as we know it on this planet.
Well, I think that's, again, a good question, Arthur. What a lot of people think of a nuclear weapon as just a bigger, better bomb, to get to your alliteration again. But they don't realize that a nuclear weapon puts an enormous amount of dust and dirt into the atmosphere. And this circulates around the world. And that will then cause what we call a nuclear winter. It will actually partially block out the sun, resulting in crop failure, resulting in famine, and resulting in people starving to death. And even a limited war between India and Pakistan, we've done the computer modeling on this. We first thought it was going to be 2.5 billion people would die over the succeeding 10 years. We now have improved our computer modeling, and that's now up to 3.5 to 4 to 5 billion people that would die of starvation over the following 10 years.
Aren't we talking about they're almost half the human race?
Correct. The second thing is that people don't realize about nuclear weapons, and pointed out in your film, is the effects of radiation. And again, radiation will travel around the world and cause untold numbers of cancers, miscarriages, heart attacks, renal failure, and people will die of that. And then there's a third thing, that if you detonated a nuclear weapon up into the atmosphere, it would destroy electromagnetic radiation, which would therefore wipe out all electrical electricity. And again, you being a film buff, remember the movie The Day the World Stood Still. And that was done 40 years ago or more. And that showed how, again, electricity, once that stopped and disrupted, the world will come to a standstill. We saw it very briefly with the solar flare knocking out the transformers in northern Quebec, where the whole of northeastern seaboard was blacked out for many hours. I think that was more 15 or 20 years ago. But nuclear weapons are very powerful, but in many more different ways than just being a bigger, better bomb.
Wow. Well, now you mentioned Hollywood movies, and there have been a few that have been warnings of disasters, including The Day After, Terminator 2. There's a number of them that you've mentioned. But you also mentioned that there's been an incredible invasion or that the military industrial complex has exerted a lot of control over the kind of movies we get normally, that these ones we've seen maybe are the exceptions. Tell us a little more about that penetration of the Hollywood. As a movie maker, I'm interested in hearing more about the penetration of the military industrial complex into Hollywood.
Well, I think it's part of the whole glorification of war. And whether it's Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan, or any of the war movies have always, they have a hero, and everybody lives happily ever after because you have a victor. In the real world, if there was a nuclear war, there would be no victors. As you say, Arthur, there will be no winners. We will all be losers. And I think when you look at why things are not changing is that, again, I always come down to money. And in the United States, there's just under 30 companies in the world that are making nuclear weapons and their delivery systems. And in the United States, they have their manufacturing plants, as you mentioned earlier, whether it's Boeing in Seattle or Grumman or General Dynamics, they are in every single state. And so for a politician to say, no, I don't think this is a good idea, this means killing jobs in his state, which is not something that he's going to want to be doing. So that's where we come into a problem.
Right. Well, and as I understand it, key players in the whole military-industrial complex have been part of the MGM board and others, and we can get into more of that perhaps later. So if movies and the mass media have helped contribute to the problem, we've also heard that somehow they've been able to do warnings that have helped maybe have a step back from the brink. But now, to me, it seems like we need to find some movies that actually give us inspiration. I mean, we can all get so depressed and bummed out listening to all this. What's going to help inspire us to build a better world? Or where can we move in that direction?
Well, I think that you, Arthur, are the answer to that. But by producing new movies that will reflect a cooperative society. And why don't you tell us more about what your plans are for terrestrials and earthlings?
Okay, sure, I'd be glad to. Well, once I realized that we were on this path to destruction, I actually had a very interesting meeting with Paul Newman. What happened is we had our board meeting for the Center for Defense Information, and because they were retired military officers, we could actually get a briefing in the Pentagon. So the board of the Center for Defense Information, the major group criticizing military spending and the drift toward nuclear war, we and our board are walking into the Pentagon, and the halls are lined with all the secretaries and assistants and all the staff gaping as we come by. And our director, Admiral Iraq, turned to Paul Newman, who was with us, and he said to Paul, "Oh, don't worry about them. They do that every time I come through." Anyway, we had our board meeting. And of course, I did the research for The War Without Winners and The Day After in the Pentagon. I would talk to Bob Bachman in the Pentagon Library and so on, because we had that kind of insider access. When the film The Day After was shown, and when that incredible emotional feeling of the devastation of nuclear war happened, I was hoping that would put an end to the arms race. We'd finally realize it was insane and wake up. And when we had that board meeting, and I looked at the statistics and I reported on the poll data, I found, yes, people were traumatized about nuclear war, but that didn't translate into opposition to the MX missile, the cruise missile, the Pershing, all these new nuclear weapons that were being developed. And I thought, my God, why not? And I realized the answer was fear. The answer was fear. And that is that if you think, oh my God, a nuclear war is coming, you might think, well, maybe we need all the weapons we can to deter it as long as we can. Maybe you're panicky. When people get panicky, they buy guns. They want to protect themselves, even if the gun's going to make them a target and more in danger. They don't think rationally. And I was meditating actually, and it came to me that long ago I've learned in my meditation that if you can viscerally picture what you want, if you can really visualize what you want, you're more likely to get there than if you're thinking, oh my God, terrible things are going to happen, everything's going to go wrong. So I thought, well, God, that must be true for the whole society. What if we could envision where we want to move toward? So after our board meeting, Paul Newman and Joanne, his wife, came into my office and they said, what next, Kanegis? And I said, well, you know, I was thinking, why doesn't somebody in Hollywood make a feature film that takes us on an adventure into a peaceful and positive future? Well, Paul thought about it a minute and he said, you know, Arthur, I don't think anyone in Hollywood knows what a peaceful future would look like. Why don't you do it? Well, I said, I've only made documentaries. How could I make a feature film? He said, well, why don't you try it? Write a story. So that got me started. I actually proposed that to Admiral Rock, and he said, well, that's not the center's job. So I left CDI and I started Future Wave, with the WAVE standing for Working for Alternatives to Violence Through Entertainment. How can entertainment actually create the alternatives rather than just show all the bad violence? And we've worked on this for many years. We had a proposal called Astrocops, Peace Engineers for the 21st Century, which actually I ended up winning some screenplay contests, other things, but we couldn't get anybody to fund it. We actually got to a very high level at one of the top studios, and they said, well, look, you know, we just don't know whether there's a market for a film like this. And then I discovered Gary's amazing story, which is so uplifting and was a first step. So I hope everyone will go to theworldismycountry.com and sign in to watch our film that's an inspiring story, with Gary kind of giving a key to how we can turn this around. But beyond that, I am working, as you mentioned, on a proposal for a TV series called Earthians. And it's how it's actually giving young people a chance to every week experience living in the people-powered planet we're picturing. Give them a chance to see, what does it look like if we have a world where we the people are interactively using this power of the internet to actually begin to create a better way to govern our world. Now, see the secret. Well, maybe I'm going on too long. I'll let you respond to that a little bit, because this is really a podcast about interviewing you, and I could take the whole hour. But go ahead, Richard. Any response or comments on that idea of moving forward with visualizing a people-powered planet?
Well, I think right now, as I said, we're 100 seconds to midnight. We're very destabilized. We have the threat of climate change, but we also have the existential threat of a nuclear war. And that can be changed or can happen very quickly. And so I think that we do need to mobilize the masses. And I certainly see films and movies as one of the ways of doing that. The other way is also with video games. And I think that is another way that we can reach what we call in Rotary, the new generation, or our youth, the millennials, the X generation, all of our youth, to mobilize them. And of course, what you need to do in your country is to mobilize them to get out and vote on November 3rd.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely a step forward. But as you mentioned, a lot of this even happened under Obama, so it's not enough. It's very important to vote, and it's very important to move in the right direction. But it's also very important that people stay vigilant, whoever the president is. Here's the key secret that Gary said. He said that he realized that we don't need to. You know, here we are all begging and pleading our government leaders to step back from nuclear war, to make peace. And he said, well, look, the Declaration of Independence says it is the right of the people to institute new government. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights that he helped play a role, you'll see in our movie, in finally triggering its unanimous passage, you'll see that it says It is the will of the people. The authority of government is based on the will of the people. And almost every constitution says the same thing. So he says, well, look, why are we beating our heads against the wall trying to make changes within this broken nation state system when the national leader's loyalty is to the self, not the whole, and it's a whole win-lose system of democracy where, you know, we have to, it was a horse and buggy era thing where we had to send people off to a distant city to vote for us and to represent us. But now he said we can all meet together in the global room. Why don't we use these incredible new tools of the internet and so on to create a people-powered kind of enforcement, a people-powered government? And he took the first step. He declared a government of, by, and for the people of the world. And he laughs about it. He says, well, I mean, you know, it's, you know, how can one guy just declare a government? On the other hand, when they say that it's people who, it is the right of the people to institute new government, well, who are the people? Is it old guys in gray wigs, or is it you and I? So somebody's got to take the first step. And he initiated the idea that he called this integrity. Instead of a system where 50%, you know, one person, one side wins, the other side loses. If you take people of opposite persuasions, you bring Arabs and Jews or Republicans and Democrats or any opposite, and you bring them in a room and say, who's right, who's wrong? Well, you're going to fight it out. You're not going to get anywhere. But if you bring them together and you go through some of these processes like revolutionary conversations, convergence thinking, there's a whole range of them where you begin to say, okay, what is it that each of you need? How do you connect with who the person is and what their feelings are? What do you want in life? Well, you start discovering, you know, one child will say, well, look, I just want a safe and secure, you know, future for my children and myself. And the other person said, well, that's what I want. No, that's what I want. Well, we both want that. And you begin to come to a convergence thinking. And he proposed that instead of the old organization chart with, you know, the king on top or the president on top and everybody underneath, you turn that into a geodesic sphere where as it revolves, everyone is on top in their area, in their field. I mean, if you just take something simple like applying that to a company, yes, the president is on top when it comes to administration, but the janitor is on top when it comes to keeping the toilets running, because if they're overflowing and smelling, the whole company shuts down. And supply is, if they're not supplying toilet paper or payroll is not supplying payroll, each one is on top of the world in their sphere of this. And that's true for the planet as a whole. We're all on top of the world in our area. And what he proposed is these series of synergistic, based on Bucky Fuller's global, geodesic sphere of interacting spheres. And the key part of it was that, you know, these Zoom meetings all over the world are fantastic. These are our beginning to do these. We have a Rotary E-Club of World Peace that you're a part of, Richard. And what he proposed is that in these interactive groups, the more you bring it together in that group, people of opposite persuasions, the more weight that synergistic conclusion you come to has on the algorithm that brings to the top the highest and best wisdom of humanity. So if you just get together, people all start and agree with each other, well, yeah, you'll have some impact. But if you say, okay, let's invite this person who, and people could put themselves up because they want to also increase their impact, say, okay, I'm willing to talk to groups of opposite sides. Okay, you run down the menu. All right, here's somebody, let's try this person. We'll invite them to our meeting. And you come to convergence thinking that has more impact on these world decisions. So there are ways we can explore and play out in movies and picture some better ways of running our world that move beyond the horse and buggy day governance systems we currently have. As Gary would say, we humans are a very inventive species. Let's invent something new.
And I think you've touched on a number of points there, Arthur. I think we in Rotary were there at the start of the United Nations. We in Rotary were there at the formation of the Declaration of Human Rights. And what we are now doing is in Rotary is the inter-country committees, where again, Rotarians from the United States talk with Rotarians in Russia. And we're looking to start Rotarians in India, talking with Rotarians in Pakistan, and back and forth. You mentioned the power of the internet, the cell phone. That was brought very clearly with Arab Spring. that was how they brought in large numbers of people to overthrow the governments at that time. So again, it reminds me of Margaret Mead, who said, never doubt the power of a small group of individuals to change the world. Indeed, it has always been thus.
Exactly.
And, so that's why we're doing this, Arthur, you and me.
Yeah.
And we are coming together. And I think Margaret Wheatley in her book had pointed out that it's, these little isolated islands of sanity that are going to change the world. And I think that we in Rotary and our Rotary clubs can do our bit, whether it's with the ICANN Cities Appeal to get our own municipalities to say that we support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And we can sign the Japanese Hibakusha Appeal, which basically says the same thing. And all of a sudden it's going to be like Eisenhower said, one of these days the governments have to get out of the way and let the people power take over.
Yep, that's what he said. One of these days people are going to want peace so much that governments are going to have to get out of their way and let them have it. And I think you're a good example of that. Well, now you have mentioned some key things, and we need to tell people how to get to those resources before I throw this open to some questions. So the Rotary E-Club of World Peace, of course, people can just go to the web and say Rotary E-Club of World Peace. It'll pop up, and actually the Zoom link is there every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can join us in having some amazing speakers on key peace issues. Now, you're a part of two groups that have won Nobel Peace Prizes, the International Physicians, as you mentioned, but also the ICANN. Tell us more about ICANN and how people can connect with actually helping. It looks like we really can get that treaty to be officially international law. How do people join in that effort?
Okay. As I said, IPPNW got the Nobel Prize in '85 for an American cardiologist and a Russian cardiologist coming together and influencing their leaders, like you did with your film The Day After. Four members of IPPNW then got together and formed ICANN, the International Campaign Against Nuclear and then Weapons, little W after that. And I think now we in Rotary can partner with ICANN. As so my club in Sudbury, Ontario, there's a club in Sweden, the We Club, the Rotary E-Club has also partnered with ICANN. And we're all working as NGOs to promote this treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. So clubs can do that partnering.
That's excellent. I think Rotary is key. Rotary connects the world. Rotary is in many ways a model for the People-Powered Planet because it's people all over the world doing functions that used to be thought of as governmental functions, but it's people taking the initiative to just do them interactively and mobilize their resources to do them. So I think Rotary is an excellent example of moving toward the People-Powered Planet.
And also Rotary is very much changing. As you said, Arthur, it used to be old gray-haired white guys like myself. But now we're going to have a woman, a president. Jennifer Jones is the nominee, and she comes from Canada. Yay, Canada. And I think, again, Rotary can play a much larger role at the United Nations. We have the Rotary network there. The International Red Cross and Red Crescent organizations has a seat at the GA, General Assembly, the same as Rotary does. But, and they are active on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. They're at the meetings on the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And we in Rotary, we could be doing the same, but have not, because we have thought it's been political, it's been controversial. But really, it is humanitarian. And what we have to do is to prevent this existential threat, this threat of nuclear weapons that will destroy us all. And
Okay,
so it is nonpartisan, and this is what we need to be doing. And when you look at our Rotary needs new members, and our membership, we lose a lot, we gain some, primarily from Asia now and Africa. But here in North America, what we need to do is being attracting our new generation.
good.
And what they're interested in is climate change.
Great.
And so again, Rotary has just changed by having the environment as a seventh area of focus. So
Wonderful.
Rotary is changing tremendously. And so I'm very optimistic that we can make change and can get rid of nuclear weapons. The
Good.
thing is that
Now
Rotarians, we're 1.2 million, and when you throw in interactors and rotaractors and all the other allied, we're actually about 2 million. And we are connected with people in high places.
Now,
And so we can change the world.
I notice we're about to run out of time, so I want to throw open to a few questions before we're finished. Melanie, you want to take it over and field some of the questions?
Yes, hello everyone. This was phenomenal. Thank you so much, Richard. And we do have a question from Michael Caruso. Michael, you can unmute yourself and put yourself on camera, and I'll put everybody on camera so everybody can do the same.
Well, good morning and thank you. It's a tremendous presentation. One of the questions I have, you mentioned there were 82 countries have signed, 44 have ratified, so that leaves 38 of these 82 that have not ratified. Do you expect our next 6 countries will come out of this group of 38, and any idea how long that might take, and can we put pressure on any of them or whatever?
Certainly, Michael. All those 38 will sign or will ratify the treaty. Again, it's a question of time. It's the old legal, political, working through the wheels of power. And so we had 3 sign on the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, Ireland, Nigeria, and New. And then on the bombing of Nagasaki, we had St. Kitts and Nevis, one Caribbean country, ratify that. And so I would expect there'll be some more ratifications on the International Day of Peace, which is on the 21st of September. We might have some people ratify on Gandhi's birthday on the 2nd of October. So these ratifications seem to be, they're coming in, and they will continue to come in. And, you know, I mean, I'm optimistic that we may reach that 50 by New Year's.
Wonderful. Are there other questions coming in from either our YouTube? We're live on YouTube, or from other people who are in our club who've gone to the worldismycountry.com/club and actually signed up to be live as part of this Zoom.
Yes, we have a question from Kolavino Chand. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Richard, very nice to hear you answering so many questions from Arthur, and they're very relevant to the nuclear disarmament. And I have a very simple question to you, that if I understand that all these nuclear armed nations, they say, if I understand, that they will not be the first one to apply or use these nuclear weapons. Am I right? First of all, I want to know that, are they everybody accepting that they won't be the first one to use these nuclear weapons? Is that true?
Unfortunately not. Only China at the moment has said that they will not use nuclear weapons first. All the other 8 countries at one time or another did say that, but have now withdrawn from that statement. And again, that is something that we, the people-powered participants, need to do, is to get our 9 countries, along with the umbrella countries, to say that, no, we won't use nuclear weapons first. That would be an excellent step, Chad.
Yes. And another thing I want to ask is that it is where if China, which is surprisingly, is I was with the impression that they may not be the first one to accept that, but the fact is that China is saying that they won't be the first one to use, is a very good welcoming message from China. And if that is the case, let the other nations follow China. And if that is the case, then keeping all these accumulating of nuclear weapons speaks very illogical for keeping them and wasting so many trillions of dollars. Second thing I want to also share with you is that will there be these NGOs like ICANN or IPPNW or many other institutions are there? They can join together and call these world leaders of these 9 nations for a forum, for a meeting, where actually open forum to speak out. Otherwise, every time individually you are talking something different and those are not compiling, they are not coming in consensus. Instead of that, call these 9 nations, make a meeting which will be heard by everybody in the world, where I think that speaks sensible. Otherwise, making all these efforts with few people attending, few people not attending, probably it's not leading to the solution.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Chad. I didn't talk about it, but I was at the United Nations for the Non-Proliferation Treaty deliberations a year ago. And then, of course, this year was supposed to be the main discussion and was prevented by COVID. But when that happened, the whole, and it works by consensus, which means are bringing people together. But what happened was it actually translated as I have the vote and I have the a veto. And so I will object to everything that the other person will say. And as a result, it was most unharmonious gathering, because you had a clique over here, sort of the American clique, you had the Russian clique, you had the group from the Middle East, from the Arabs, and each was saying something different, and they never did come to any consensus. And so there was never any final report after the NPT.
Now, let me just say, by the way, that we're technically out of time. Let me ask Richard to once again give the URL where people should go to learn more about what you're doing, about ICANN and the International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War. Where do people go?
They can certainly just Google ICANN.
Now, there's 2 ICANNs. There's the ICANN that is registering names, and then there's the ICANN that's the nuclear registering internet names, and there's this one. How do they know they're getting the right one? What do they Google?
Put in International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons, spell it out, is always better than doing the alphabet soup. Second, putting it in ICANN nuclear weapons, go to sign the Rotary Japanese Hibakusha Appeal, and that's found at PEAC Institute. So it's peace without the last E, institute.org. And
if someone would put that in the chat box, maybe Chad, you can do that.
The chat box.
Chad has it in there. Okay, good.
yeah, it's actually already there.
Yeah, good for you, Chad. Tom, by the way, who's been a volunteer helping us. We're very grateful for his pitching in and helping with what we're doing here, getting word out, and helping us get this up on YouTube. And he's going to turn his camera on here in a minute and continue. There he is. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, no questions from the YouTube live stream. You know, I had, I guess, the one thing that I see is from my own experience. I worked most of my career in aerospace building weapons of war. And I had posted something yesterday and I got an interesting response back. Basically what I was saying is if more and more folks would retrain, think about the issues and wake up. And I got a response back from someone who said her father also actually worked at Martin Marietta in Arizona building missiles. And he got so sick and tired of knowing what was happening, the end result of firing missiles on innocent people, that he retrained himself and became a dentist. So, it's kind of like the what happened to me when I, before I retired, I really probably kind of woke up to the realization maybe 15 years ago. And I just think that more and more communities should reach out, and as people start to recognize what the military industrial complex is doing, maybe more and more people will become dentists and now get free teeth.
Good for you, Tom. Well, let's see. Any other comments or questions that have come in, or people that want to ask another question of Richard before we do actually officially close the meeting? Any other questions?
All the questions were answered. I think that
Wonderful.
was done. And I just want to remind people, if you haven't become a club member, please do so at theworldismycountry.com/club. It's the first 2 months are free. And then we have wonderful discussions. Thank you, Richard. Oh my goodness. So yeah, just join us at the club. If you haven't seen our movie, there is the short version. Actually, you can see free now for the moment during the crisis. We have it. You just go to theworldismycountry.com.
Please join us next week, August 19th, when we'll continue this question about how do we move from a war without winners to being winners without war, as we talked with Dr. Ira Helfand, who is the co-president of International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War. He gave an incredibly powerful speech at the Rotary International Peace Conference that just riveted everyone. And he is a terrific speaker. One of the questions we'll ask him is, okay, say we get the signatures, so enough signatures to make this officially a part of international law, and yet the nuclear countries violate it. How can we, the people, create people-powered enforcement? If you go to theworldismycountry.com/club, you'll see that we also had a wonderful police chief talking about how people have to be part of peace enforcement in our cities, and policemen have to become peace officers. There are many ways we're interactively working with people. We can begin to change our world. The People-Powered Planet podcast, the next edition with Ira Helfand, and then coming up beyond that, we have an amazing talk coming up on August 26th with Sushiant, who is the winner of the huge prize for best ideas on better ways to govern our planet. His whole bottom-up people-powered democracy idea. Okay, so long. Let's sign off. Bye, everybody.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.